The year is 2023. A statewide initiative to digitize and re-examine decades-old cold cases unearthed a chilling anomaly. Tucked away within the dusty archives of an unrelated crime, a young genealogist, volunteering with the Ohio Cold Case Unit, stumbled upon a coded ledger. Its decryption, using advanced algorithms, unraveled a sophisticated money laundering operation tied to powerful political figures. But it was a single, cryptic entry, dated shortly after a young journalist vanished in 1999, that truly sent a shiver down spines. Loose end tied up by Agent X. Small payment recorded. 24 years of silence had been broken by a whisper of conspiracy, a promise of a truth far darker than anyone could have imagined. The discovery wasn't just about a missing life, it hinted at a meticulously orchestrated cover-up, a chilling testament to secrets buried deep within the heartland. The ledger lay open, its digital confession illuminated by stark fluorescent light, a silent witness to a crime that had haunted a state for a generation. Sarah Jenkins was 23 years old, a rising star at the Akron Chronicle, her pen a weapon against injustice, her spirit aflame against the encroaching shadows of corruption. In the autumn of 1999, her relentless pursuit of truth led her to the precipice of something immense, something dangerous. She had been chasing a deeply buried corruption case, a string of investigative interviews pushing boundaries, culminating in a clandestine meeting with a source near the old Akron Inner-Belt Highway interchange. She would never make it home. Her car, a forest green 1997 Honda Civic, found abandoned a week later, stripped clean of any trace, a phantom vehicle in a deserted industrial lot. No struggle, no witnesses, no digital footprint in an era where such things were more easily erased than they are today. Sarah Jenkins hadn't just disappeared, she had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a void that time itself seemed unable to fill. What happened to her that Tuesday evening, October 19, 1999, became the central, agonizing question. The initial investigation, led by the pragmatic Detective Miller, hit a wall of impenetrable silence. Leads evaporated like mist, a misidentified sighting on a distant bus, theories of voluntary disappearance, even the whispered specter of random violence. All dead ends. The case fractured, splintering into 1,000 unanswered questions. Who was her source? What exactly had Sarah uncovered? The cryptic ledger from 2023 offered the first brutal clue. The informant was a double agent, and Sarah had become an inconvenient loose end. The promise of what lay within those encrypted communications was staggering, suggesting that Sarah's quest for justice had led her directly into the crosshairs of a conspiracy that had manipulated investigations and silenced threats for decades. The truth, waiting to be unearthed, was about to prove far more disturbing than any speculative theory. Sarah was more than a journalist. She was a daughter, an only child adored by her parents, a beacon of hope and fierce independence. Her early morning runs in Goodyear Heights Metro Park, her weekly calls to her grandmother, the late nights spent poring over leads. These were the fragments of a life brimming with promise and idealism. Her vulnerability, a naive belief that truth could conquer any darkness, had drawn her into a dangerous game. Now, her parents lived in the perpetual twilight of her absence, their pleas for answers met with the echoing silence of an unsolved mystery. For 24 years, they clung to hope, their lives defined by an agonizing question mark. This wasn't just a story of a missing person, it was the story of a life extinguished, a family shattered, and a community blindsided by the hidden darkness within its own ranks. Now, the truth is finally coming to light, and it is more horrific than anyone could have imagined. The arrest of a pillar of the community, a trusted public official, has sent shockwaves through Ohio, revealing the terrifying extent of the betrayal. We are about to delve into the chilling details of how Sarah Jenkins uncovered a deeply entrenched network, how she was silenced, and how the truth, buried for decades, has finally been exhumed. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of this shocking cold case, a story that will forever change how we look at the people we trust and the secrets they keep. Sarah Jenkins was 23 years old, a vibrant spark in Akron's nascent digital age. Her features were sharp, intelligent, framed by auburn hair that often escaped its hasty ponytail as she leaned over a keyboard. Her eyes, a clear, inquisitive blue, seemed to absorb the world with an almost tangible intensity. There was a restless energy about her, a physical manifestation of a mind that never quite switched off. One particular memory often revisited by those who knew her, a chilly October morning, just hours before she vanished. Sarah, bundled in a worn fleece jacket, was spotted by a fellow runner, not on her usual park path, but a few blocks further into a less trafficked residential street. She was talking animatedly, gesturing with one hand while clutching a worn reporter's notebook in the other, her expression a potent mix of excitement and guarded urgency. It was a fleeting image, a snapshot of a young woman on the cusp of something significant, something that would define her legacy far beyond her years. Her days were a carefully orchestrated symphony of professional ambition and personal connection. Mornings began before dawn, a brisk run through Goodyear Heights Metro Park, the crisp autumn air filling her lungs, her mind already sifting through the day's potential stories. By 7:00 a.m., she'd be showered and heading to the Akron Chronicle, her worn Canon AE-1 camera slung over her shoulder, a relic in an increasingly digital world. She'd share a quick, affectionate call with her grandmother, Mabel, whose warm laugh always seemed to ground Sarah. Her desk was a controlled chaos of files, annotated notes, and the faint scent of stale coffee. Editor Mike Thompson often described her afternoons as a blur of investigative interviews, phone calls, and late nights poring over documents, fueled by an almost insatiable hunger for truth. She'd always make time for a quick call home to her parents, a ritual she'd never miss, a moment to share the day's small triumphs and reassure them of her well-being, even as she pursued increasingly dangerous leads. Her evenings, when not chasing a story, were often spent curled up with a book or catching up with her small circle of trusted friends at a local diner, discussing everything from politics to pop culture. Sarah possessed an unwavering moral compass, a fierce dedication to justice that bordered on the absolute. Her colleagues at the Chronicle remembered her as relentless, tenacious, someone who wouldn't let go of a story once she'd sunk her teeth into it. "She had this way of looking at you," recalled a former colleague, "like she could see right through any pretense. If you were hiding something, Sarah would find it." This unyielding integrity wasn't just a professional trait, it permeated her personal life. She was fiercely loyal, a staunch defender of the underdog, and possessed a naive, yet profound, belief in the inherent goodness of people. This idealism, while inspiring, sometimes led her to underestimate the depths of human depravity, a vulnerability that those who sought to silence her would ruthlessly exploit. Her father, Richard, often shared how Sarah, even as a child, would stand up to bullies, her small voice ringing with an authority beyond her years. Her dreams were as bright as her spirit was indomitable. She spoke often of breaking the major story, of those involved beneath the politics of Ohio politics, and of even the way for those who had been silent by power and privilege. She envisioned a future where investigative journalism acted as a bulwark against injustice, and she was determined to be at the forefront of that fight. Her immediate plans involved consolidating the information she'd gathered on a particular string of anonymous campaign donations and their suspicious ties to local zoning permits, a story she believed could finally bring down a powerful, entrenched network. She had a long-planned weekend trip to visit her parents in Cincinnati that following month, a chance to recharge before diving into potentially explosive new angles of her investigation. Sarah also held a deep responsibility towards her aging grandmother, Mabel, whom she visited weekly and ensured was never lonely. The enigma of Sarah Jenkins' disappearance was amplified by the very fabric of her being. She wasn't someone prone to impulsivity or recklessness, beyond her professional pursuit of truth. Her life in Akron was rich and layered, filled with deep familial bonds, cherished friendships, and a career she poured her entire soul into. There was no evidence of depression, no looming debts, no personal crisis that would precipitate a voluntary vanishing act. Her commitments, both professional and personal, were anchors that held her firmly to her life. The idea that she would simply walk away from her calling, from her family, from the grandmother she adored, was not just improbable. It was fundamentally antithetical to everything Sarah Jenkins represented. To know her was to understand that her absence was not a choice, but an extrication forcefully executed. Akron, Ohio, 1999. The air in Goodyear Heights Metro Park carried the crisp, melancholic scent of fallen leaves, a perfume unique to early autumn in the Rust Belt. Sarah Jenkins knew these trails like the back of her hand. She navigated them with the practiced ease of someone seeking solace and clarity, her breath missing in the cool morning air as she ran. The paths wound through a landscape of gentle hills, shaded by mature oaks and maples, their branches a scaffold against a sky that was often a muted, overcast gray. Beyond the park's familiar embrace, Akron itself was a city of stark contrasts. Industrial grit met burgeoning suburban sprawl, the skeletal remains of factories whispering of a bygone era, while new strip malls pulsed with nascent consumerism. Sarah's apartment downtown, a third-floor walk-up on Locust Street, overlooked a stretch of brick buildings that had seen better days, the hum of the city a constant, low thrum beneath her window. It was a place where one could feel both intimately connected to the pulse of urban life and surprisingly anonymous within its labyrinthine streets. The turn of the millennium cast a long, peculiar shadow over Akron. The digital age was dawning, a hesitant sunrise over a region still deeply rooted in the traditions of the industrial age. For Sarah, life was a blend of old and new. Early mornings spent with the tangible way of her Canon AE-1 camera contrasted with the nascent thrill of the internet, where nascent online forums and early websites buzzed with information she'd once have only dreamed of accessing. Local news, heavily reliant on print and evening broadcasts, still held sway, but the whisper of a connected world was undeniable. This was a time before widespread smartphone ubiquity, before constant digital tracking was an inescapable reality. A payphone could be a lifeline, a printed map a necessity. It was an era where information, while potentially more abundant, was also arguably easier to obscure, a truth Sarah was beginning to understand with unsettling clarity as she peeled back the layers of her investigation. The societal norms prioritized a certain kind of civic trust, a deference to established institutions, a world that felt, in retrospect, both simpler and more naively vulnerable. Akron's community of the late 1990s was, in many ways, a microcosm of its industrial past. Neighborhoods were tight-knit, bound by shared history and the rhythms of working-class life. Sarah, though new to the city's journalistic scene, quickly integrated herself, her sharp mind and relentless energy making her a familiar, if sometimes formidable, presence at local government meetings, community forums, and coffee shops. Her editor, Mike Thompson, a seasoned journalist with a gruff exterior and a sharp nose for a good story, became a mentor. Detective Miller, the pragmatic force behind the initial, ultimately fruitless, investigation, represented the established order, a man accustomed to the tangible evidence of crime scenes, not the ephemeral trails of political corruption. Sarah's parents, Richard and Alina, were her anchor, their unconditional love a constant reminder of the personal stakes in her quest for truth. Her grandmother, Mabel, offered a grounding wisdom, her weekly calls a vital ritual. The city operated on unspoken understandings, a collective belief that the structures of power were, for the most part, benign, a perception that masked a more dangerous reality for those who dared to look too closely. Even in the seemingly stable environment, cracks of vulnerability began to appear. Sarah's pursuit of a deeply buried corruption case meant she was venturing into territory few dared to tread. She understood the risks, the potential repercussions for those she interviewed and for herself. There were whispers of powerful figures operating in the shadows, of deals struck in backrooms, of a money laundering operation that had metastasized within the city's financial and political veins. The secluded nature of the old Akron Innerbelt Highway interchange, a place of forgotten infrastructure and encroaching overgrowth, became a recurring locale in her clandestine meetings, a desolate nexus far from the watchful eyes of community scrutiny. The inherent anonymity of a large, industrial city, a feature that had once appealed to Sarah's independent spirit, now contributed to the chilling possibility of a vanishing act that left no trace, a stark contrast to the era's prevailing, if often misplaced, sense of collective safety. The seemingly mundane autumn day, Tuesday, October 19, 1999, became the pivot point, a day where the ordinary fabric of Akron tore apart. Sarah's routine, the early morning run in Goodyear Heights, the focused energy at the Chronicle, the carefully arranged calls to her family, all were elements that wove her into the very lifeblood of the city. She moved through these spaces with a confidence born of preparedness and a belief in the inherent power of truth. Yet, the very elements that grounded her dedication to her career, her meticulous note-taking, her unwavering commitment to her sources were precisely the attributes that made her an ideal target for those seeking to preserve their secrets. The familiar streets of Akron, the park where she sought clarity, the office where she pursued justice, all were about to transform from mundane bankrupts into the silent, unknowable witnesses to a carefully orchestrated act of erasure, her fate sealed by the very avenues she used to illuminate the truth. Chapter 4: The Fateful Day. Opening of the Fateful Day, Tuesday, October 19, 1999. The pre-dawn chill of Akron seeped through Sarah Jenkins' apartment window, a familiar, bracing kiss that pulled her from sleep before her alarm could sound. It was 5:15 a.m. The sky outside was a bruised gray, hints of purple bleeding into the eastern horizon, promising a typical overcast October day. Sarah stretched, her muscles protesting the early hour, but her mind was already racing, sifting through the fragmented reports and whispers that had consumed her for weeks. She padded into the small kitchen, the linoleum cool beneath her bare feet, and started the coffee maker, its familiar gurgle a comforting prelude to the day. She pulled on her running gear, a familiar worn fleece jacket over a thermal top, the scent of stale coffee clinging to its fibers, a fragrance that would soon be the last tangible trace of her mundane morning. Nothing about this Tuesday suggested it would be anything other than another day in her relentless pursuit of truth. Sarah Jenkins, 23, woke at 5:15 a.m. on Tuesday, October 19, 1999. The pre-dawn air in Akron was crisp, carrying the damp scent of fallen leaves promising a cool autumn day. She rose with her usual quiet efficiency, heading straight for the coffee maker, its familiar grind and brew a comforting ritual. The sky outside her third-floor Locust Street apartment was the muted gray of an impending overcast day, a familiar backdrop to Akron's industrial palette. She laced up her running shoes, pulling on her favorite faded fleece jacket, oblivious to the profound significance this ordinary morning would soon acquire. Her mind, however, was already a whirlwind of investigative threads, the day's promise of potential breakthroughs mingling with the usual anxieties of her work. Morning routine and initial interactions. At 5:45 a.m., Sarah set out for her customary run through Goodyear Heights Metro Park. The dew-laden trails were hushed, the rustling leaves her only companions. She ran with a focused intensity, her thoughts miles ahead, dissecting the potential motives and connections of the corruption she was unraveling. Around 7:00 a.m., as she rounded a familiar bend near the western edge of the park, a fellow runner, Mark Bradshaw, spotted her. He remembered her talking animatedly, gesturing with her reporter's notebook, her expression a mix of excitement and guarded urgency. Sarah, bundled in her green fleece, was clutching the notebook, her auburn hair escaping its ponytail. It was a fleeting, almost ghost-like encounter, the last time anyone would see her engaged in such a natural, determined display. Bradshaw waved. She offered a brief, distracted nod before turning back toward the busier park entrance, her pace quickening. By 7:45 a.m., Sarah was back at her apartment, showering and dressing in simple, practical attire befitting a day at the newspaper, dark washable sacks, a simple blouse, and comfortable flats. She shared a brief, affectionate phone call with her grandmother, Mabel, at 8:02 a.m. "Have a good day, dear," Mabel's warm voice crackled over the line. "Don't forget to eat something substantial, not just coffee and courage." Sarah chuckled, promising she would. She grabbed her worn reporter's notebook, her Canon AE1 camera bag, and her keys, leaving her apartment at 8:25 a.m. to head to the Akron Chronicle. Her parents, Richard and Alina, were expecting her call later that evening, as always. There were no concerns, no foreshadowing, just the comfortable rhythm of a life lived with purpose. The day's unfolding specific events. Sarah arrived at the Akron Chronicle offices at 8:40 a.m. Editor Mike Thompson recalled seeing her at her desk by 8:50 a.m., already immersed in her work, the faint scent of coffee and old paper surrounding her. She spent the morning poring over financial documents and cross-referencing notes related to her corruption investigation, her fingers flying across her keyboard. At 10:17 a.m., she made a brief, hushed phone call from her desk, lively to his source, her voice low and urgent. "Thompson, get out at the confidential informant you'd mentioned, the one with damaging documents." By 12:30 p.m., she grabbed a quick sandwich from the deli down the street, eating at her desk while reviewing more files. The afternoon was a blur of investigative interviews. At 2:40 p.m., she met briefly with a low-level city clerk in a quiet corner of the public library's reference section, her expression serious, exchanging hushed words and possibly a small, folded document. Thompson spoke with her around 5:30 p.m., noting her palpable excitement. "I think I've got Mike," she'd said, her eyes alight. "This informant, they are ready to give me everything. A meeting tonight, near the old interchange. It could be huge." He cautioned her to be careful, a familiar refrain that always seemed to fall on deaf ears when Sarah was this close to a breakthrough. Her last documented email, sent at 5:58 p.m., was a brief confirmation to her editor that she would be unavailable for follow-up questions after 7:00 p.m. due to her clandestine meeting. The last documented moment. Sarah left the Akron Chronicle at 6:10 p.m. Her destination, the old Akron Innerbelt Highway interchange. Her car, the distinctive forest green 1997 Honda Civic, was last definitively spotted by a gas station attendant at a station directly off Route 8 at 7:05 p.m. The attendant, a man named Carl, remembered her because she'd paid for her gas with cash and seemed preoccupied, her gaze distant. He recalled her looking at her watch, then glancing nervously down the road. Her express destination was a meeting with a source at 7:30 p.m. at a secluded spot along the abandoned stretch of the Innerbelt, a desolate area known for its graffiti and the encroaching wilderness. She was alone. She appeared nervous but determined, a young woman on the cusp of a major revelation, unaware of the abyss that lay waiting. The moment of transition to mystery. Sarah Jenkins was expected back at her apartment by 9:00 p.m. By 10:00 p.m., her usual call to her parents hadn't come. By 11:00 p.m., as the city lights began to blur into an indifferent haze, a knot of unease tightened in her parents' stomachs. They called her cell phone, the one she always carried, but which her editor had heard her mention might be turned off for the meeting. It went straight to voicemail. At 11:30 p.m., a somber-faced Mike Thompson contacted the Akron Police Department. The routine query, the last known communications, the missing car, the planned clandestine meeting, the components of a normal Tuesday evening began to coalesce into something terrifyingly abnormal. The silence that descended upon Sarah's life was not the earned peace after a day's work, but the terrifying, absolute void of her vanishing. The transition from a determined journalist chasing a story to a ghost lost in the Ohio Rust Belt began in the hours after 7:30 p.m. on that fateful October Tuesday, an enigma that would haunt a state for a generation. The phone rang for the third time that night, jolting Sarah Jenkins from a restless doze in her armchair. It was 11:47 p.m., Tuesday, October 19, 1999. Her husband, Richard, was already pacing the living room, his usual stoic demeanor cracking around the edges. Sarah was due for her weekly call after her journalistic late nights, a ritual they maintained since she'd moved to Akron. The clock ticked past 10:00 p.m., then 11:00 p.m. without a word. Eleanor's throat tightened with a familiar fear, the one that had begun to bloom in her chest an hour ago, a cold, creeping dread. Richard picked up the third ring, his voice tight. "Sir, why haven't you called?" Static hissed, then a low, mechanical tone. Callback failed. He hung up, his face pale. He tried her cell phone again, the one she relied on for on-the-go information. Straight to voicemail. The rationalizations, a dead battery, a meeting running over, an urgent lead that kept her from her phone, felt increasingly hollow, thin veils over a gathering storm. By 11:30 p.m., the faint hum of the refrigerator was deafening, a counterpoint to the hammering in Eleanor's chest. Concern had curdled into a primal, gnawing fear. Sleep had ceased to be an option. Panic was now their only companion. This wasn't just a late return. This was a void where their daughter should be. At 11:38 p.m., sitting in their quiet Cincinnati home, Richard dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, a stark contrast to the tremor in his own. "Cincinnati Police Department, how can I help you?" he began, his voice catching. "My daughter Sarah Jenkins, she's missing." He relayed her address in Akron, handed over her description. 23 years old, auburn hair, intelligent blue eyes, last seen wearing a green fleece jacket. He explained her profession as a journalist. The dispatcher, after a moment of standard questioning, informed him that since Sarah was an adult and the disappearance not immediately indicative of foul play, an Akron police report would be more appropriate. "But she was supposed to call us," Eleanor interjected, her voice a reedy plea. "She's never missed a call." "Never," Richard added. "She was meeting a source tonight, near the old Inner Belt Highway interchange. Something important." He emphasized her responsible nature, her lack of recklessness, the sheer improbability of her simply not showing up, not calling. The dispatcher, sensing their genuine anguish, promised to relay the information to Akron PD's non-emergency line, urging them to file a formal report immediately. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. The bureaucracy, however necessary, felt like an insurmountable barrier between them and their child. Detective Miller, an experienced yet wary veteran of the Akron Police Department, was roused from his quiet evening. The call about Sarah Jenkins, a young journalist from the Chronicle, felt different. It wasn't just another missing person. The mention of a clandestine meeting at the interchange, combined with her profession, immediately flagged it as potentially more complex. By 1:15 a.m., a responding officer had already canvassed Sarah's apartment building, confirming her vehicle was not in its usual spot and that her neighbors hadn't seen her return. Miller directed an immediate bolo, "Be on the lookout," for Sarah and her distinctive forest green 1997 Honda Civic. Standard procedure dictated, starting with the obvious, interviewing colleagues at the Chronicle, her parents, and any known friends. Mike Thompson, her editor, was interviewed first. He spoke of Sarah's relentless dedication, her current high-stakes investigation into local corruption, and her excitement about a meeting that evening. He provided details about her last known actions at the Chronicle, painting a picture of a driven journalist on the verge of a significant breakthrough. The goal was to build a preliminary timeline to pinpoint the precise moment Sarah had seemingly vanished. Even in these preliminary hours, the lack of any immediate leads, no witnesses to her departure, no distress calls, no signs of struggle at her apartment was unnerving. By mid-morning Wednesday, October 20th, the search for Sarah Jenkins had intensified. The initial missing person report had transformed into a higher priority case. Detective Miller, now fully immersed, coordinated a sweep of her known haunts, starting with Goodyear Heights Metro Park, where she was last seen running, and the vicinity of the old Akron Inner Belt Highway interchange, the site of her ill-fated rendezvous. Officers meticulously documented her apartment, finding no signs of forced entry or struggle, but noting the uncharacteristic absence of her purse and cell phone. Her car's potential path from the Chronicle office to the interchange was being meticulously pieced together, checking traffic cameras, though in 1999, their coverage was sparse and unreliable. Brief interviews with colleagues confirmed she left around 6:00 p.m., appearing focused and perhaps a little keyed up. The gas station attendant Carl, who recalled her at 7:05 p.m., was crucial, providing the last known sighting of Sarah and her vehicle. The clock was ticking. The critical first 48 hours, the period most crucial for finding a missing person alive, had begun. The absence of any substantial evidence, no discarded belongings, no struggle, no immediate witnesses was already a gnawing frustration. As Wednesday bled into Thursday, the initial investigative momentum began to encounter the hard wall of a cold case in the making. The extensive searches of the park and the interchange area yielded nothing but the quiet, indifferent autumn landscape. Interviews with Sarah's parents, Richard and Eleanor, painted a vivid picture of their daughter, intelligent, principled, but perhaps a little too trusting in her pursuit of truth. They offered no grudges, no enemies they could recall, just a desperate plea for answers. The theory of voluntary disappearance was tentatively dismissed due to Sarah's deep family ties and her unwavering dedication to her career. Accident theories were explored, but lacked any supporting evidence. The possibility of a targeted abduction linked to her investigation loomed larger with each passing hour. By Thursday afternoon, the urgency within the department was palpable. The sheer lack of progress in a case involving a young woman known to be meticulous and responsible, combined with the volatile nature of investigative journalism, suggested a complexity that far exceeded a typical missing person incident. The initial frustration was giving way to a grim realization: this would not be solved with a simple tip. The disappearance of Sarah Jenkins, a dedicated journalist, on October 19, 1999, triggered an immediate and overwhelming surge of community spirit in Akron. Within hours of the official missing person report, a spontaneous network of support began to form. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers, galvanized by Sarah's visible dedication to truth and the sheer audacity of her vanishing, organized themselves. Flyers bearing Sarah's vibrant face plastered every lamppost and storefront, a silent, desperate plea. A local church basement, usually a space for bake sales and potlucks, transformed into an impromptu command center. Volunteers, many with no prior experience but a fierce determination, organized into specialized search groups. Local outdoors enthusiasts, equipped with maps and survival gear, formed hiking parties to comb Goodyear Heights Metro Park and the treacherous, overgrown terrain surrounding the old highway interchange. Divers from a nearby lake rescue squad volunteered their expertise, ready to probe any water sources. Cyclists offered mobile reconnaissance along less accessible roads. The coordination between these civilian efforts and the official police investigation, though sometimes strained by protocol, was marked by an emergent, shared purpose to find Sarah. The collective hope was a palpable force, driving tireless efforts into the deepening autumn twilight, a testament to a community unwilling to let one of its own disappear without a fight. The Akron Police Department, initially responding with standard procedures, soon recognized the extraordinary nature and scale of the Sarah Jenkins disappearance. The sheer volume of community mobilization, coupled with the lack of any immediate, concrete leads, necessitated an exponential increase in official resources. Detective Miller found himself coordinating with the State Highway Patrol, the local fire department's rescue unit, and even federal agencies that offered specialized search and rescue capabilities. K-9 units were deployed, their handlers leading eager German shepherds and bloodhounds through the dense foliage of the park and the scarred industrial landscape of the interchange. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging technology began a grid-pattern search, their powerful spotlights cutting through the gathering darkness. An official command center, far more organized than the makeshift community hub, was established at the National Guard Armory, providing a centralized point for intelligence gathering, resource allocation, and communication between the various agencies. Drones, nascent in their capabilities but promising, were deployed for aerial reconnaissance of inaccessible areas. The search expanded relentlessly, encompassing a vast perimeter radiating from Sarah's last known location, employing systematic grid sweeps, a meticulously orchestrated military-style operation with a single, urgent objective. As the intensive search operations swung into full gear, the first tangible clues began to surface, igniting sparks of hope that were quickly extinguished. In Goodyear Heights Metro Park, searchers discovered a small, crushed journal, its pages damp and leaf-streaked. Excitement surged as it was carefully transported to the police lab, only to be identified as an unrelated nature diary belonging to a local student, lost months prior. Near the interchange, a torn piece of fabric, a vibrant green, was found snagged on a thorny bush. Initial speculation pointed to Sarah's jacket, but forensics determined it was from a civilian safety vest, likely fallen from a passing vehicle weeks earlier. Conflicting witness testimonies also emerged. One person thought they saw a green Honda heading east, another swore they saw it heading west. A grainy security camera photograph from a distant convenience store, ostensibly showing Sarah, was later debunked as a case of mistaken identity. Each potential discovery, each fragmented piece of information created a ripple of expectation, a brief surge of adrenaline for Sarah's parents and the tireless volunteers. Yet, with every passing hour, these tantalizing whispers of progress dissolved into the vast, indifferent silence, leaving behind only a fresh wave of frustration and a deepening sense of despair. The sheer scale of the search operation presented formidable challenges. The terrain surrounding the old Akron Innerbelt Highway interchange was a labyrinth of derelict industrial properties, overgrown ravines, and dense woodlands, making comprehensive ground searches incredibly arduous and time-consuming. The technological limitations of 1999, especially concerning digital forensics and widespread surveillance, severely hampered efforts to retrace Sarah's movements or digital footprint. While K9 units were valuable, the lack of a definitive scent trail following Sarah's disappearance, combined with the passage of time and varying weather conditions, limited their effectiveness. Funding for the massive, multi-agency operation, initially robust, began to face strain as the search extended into its third day without yielding significant results. Unpredictable autumn weather, including heavy rain and fog, further complicated operations, at times rendering helicopter searches impossible and turning critical areas into muddy morasses where evidence could easily be lost or obscured. The geographical vastness of the potential search area, combined with limited personnel and resources, meant that despite the best efforts, large sections remained covered only superficially, a stark reminder of the overwhelming odds against finding one hidden person in an unforgiving landscape. As the days blurred into a week with no definitive trace of Sarah, the initial wave of fervent community dedication began to encounter the harsh reality of exhaustion and dwindling resources. While core volunteers remained steadfast, the sheer number of people willing to dedicate their entire days to the search started to dwindle, as jobs, families, and the basic need for rest took their toll. Budgetary pressures began to mount on the official task force, leading to discreet discussions about reducing the scope of the active search efforts in favor of a more localized, evidence-gathering approach. The tireless work of the police, the firefighters, and the specialized units was beginning to feel like a Sisyphean task, perpetually pushing a boulder uphill with little prospect of reaching the summit. The initial, almost naive, expectation that Sarah's disappearance was a solvable mystery, perhaps a wrong turn or a temporary miscommunication, was being replaced by a grim acknowledgement that this case was far more complex, and her absence far more profound, than anyone had initially imagined. The transition from an immediate, all-consuming search to a long-term, meticulous investigation was becoming an unavoidable, disheartening certainty, underscoring the depth of the mystery and the chilling possibility of secrets buried far deeper than they could currently see. The vibrant hope that had initially fueled the search for Sarah Jenkins began to wane as the crisp autumn air of 1999 surrendered to a cold, unforgiving winter. By March 2000, with no credible sightings, no forensic breakthroughs, and the vast expanse of Ohio offering no answers, the active investigation was officially suspended. Detective Miller, now burdened by the weight of another unsolved case, watched as Sarah's file, a thick testament to expended energy and dashed hopes, was transferred to the cold case unit. Resources were systematically withdrawn, search teams disbanded, K9 units recalled, the command center at the National Guard Armory repurposed. The case remained technically open, a ghost in departmental files, but the active pursuit had dissolved into the bureaucratic reality of limited personnel and overwhelming caseloads. Miller, reassigned to a series of property crimes, found Sarah's smiling face on missing person posters fading from his immediate periphery, yet never entirely from his conscience. For a leaner and richer Jenkins, the years that followed were a slow, agonizing descent into a new normal defined by absence. The first anniversary, October 19th, 2000, was a raw wound, commemorated with silent prayers and a visit to an empty apartment that still held the lingering scent of Sarah's perfume. Over time, their grief evolved, transforming from acute despair into a chronic, dull ache. Richard, once stoic, became consumed by the details, rereading every report, poring over every flyer, a meticulous archivist of his daughter's lost life. The leaner oscillated between a desperate hope for a miracle and a crushing resignation, her relationship strained by her inability to move forward. Their living room, once filled with the warmth of family gatherings, became a shrine, every surface adorned with photographs, Sarah's favorite books placed on prominent display, a constant, unspoken dialogue with their absent child. Friends tried to offer comfort, but their well-meaning advice to move on felt like a betrayal of Sarah's memory, deepening the isolation. As technology advanced, so too did the theories surrounding Sarah's disappearance. In the burgeoning digital landscape of the early 2000s, an anonymous online forum dedicated to unsolved mysteries became Sarah's unlikely archive. Threads dedicated to the Akron enigma speculated wildly, ranging from plausible scenarios of political assassination linked to her corruption investigation, to outlandish claims of alien abduction or witness protection. Amateur sleuths created grainy, fan-made documentaries, piecing together Sarah's last known movements with sensationalized narratives, often misinterpreting her meticulous journalistic habits as coded messages. The Jenkins family found this public dissection of their tragedy intensely painful, a violation of their private grief, yet they also harbored a morbid curiosity. They learned to navigate the online whispers, some offering genuine insights, most merely fueling the rumor mill, a constant reminder that their daughter's story had become a public spectacle, a morbid fascination for strangers. The financial and emotional toll of keeping hope alive was immense. In the years following the official suspension of the investigation, the Jenkinses hired several private investigators, each fueled by the fragmented evidence and the family's unwavering faith. These investigators, though diligent, inevitably hit the same impenetrable walls, their reports filled with dead ends and dismissed theories. They consulted psychics who offered vague prophecies of water and shadows, and even parapsychologists who claimed to sense residual energy at the interchange. These attempts, born of desperation, only deepened their cycle of hope and despair, chipping away at their savings and their emotional reserves. Each failed endeavor left them more isolated, more convinced that only a truly extraordinary breakthrough could pierce the enduring mystery that had consumed their lives, a mystery that was slowly becoming Akron's most infamous local legend. By the 10th anniversary of Sarah's disappearance in 2009, the case had cemented its place in the collective memory of Ohio. Her story, a tragic narrative of a young journalist silenced while pursuing truth, was woven into the fabric of the community's identity. Occasionally, a new investigator within the state's cold case unit would tentatively review the Jenkins file, applying nascent forensic techniques to old evidence, only to find the scant clues yielding no new insights. A discarded piece of fabric from the interchange discovered years later was confirmed to be unrelated. A blurry ATM image from a distant town, initially thought to be Sarah, was definitively disproven. The mystery of Sarah Jenkins, much like the Rust Belt landscape she inhabited, had become a permanent, melancholy fixture, a stark reminder of the unanswered questions that time itself seemed incapable of erasing, leaving an unnerving quiet that felt like a prelude to something more profound, something that would finally shatter the status quo. The sterile, fluorescent hum of the Ohio Cold Case Unit archives was a stark contrast to the crisp autumn air Sarah Jenkins would have remembered. It was October 18, 2023, the day before the 24th anniversary of her disappearance. Liam O'Connell, a freshly hired, energetic genealogist volunteering his skills to digitize decades of defunct case files, was meticulously scanning archived documents from an unrelated embezzlement case involving a small-town bank manager from the early 2000s. His fingers felt gritty from the ancient paper, his eyes strained from the constant flicker of the scanner. He was about to set aside a particularly dense ledger, destined for digital oblivion, when a faint, almost imperceptible discoloration caught his eye. It wasn't dirt, but a series of odd, repeating symbols that looked out of place amidst the financial notations. Curiosity piqued. Liam zoomed in on the digitized image, his heart giving a strange lurch as he realized these weren't random scribbles. They were deliberate, coded characters, meticulously penned, a bizarre anomaly in an impeccably ordinary financial record. His breath hitched. Something felt profoundly wrong, a dissonant chord in the otherwise monotonous symphony of the archives. The ledger, officially logged as Exhibit B, Bank Manager Embezzlement Case, was a relic of a bygone era of accounting, leather-bound, its pages brittle with age and the faint, unmistakable scent of decomposition. Liam carefully isolated the pages containing the peculiar markings. The symbols were arranged in a consistent, almost rigid pattern, separated by neatly drawn vertical lines. He spent another hour on his personal laptop, cross-referencing the sequence against various public domain encryption dictionaries. It was then he remembered a lecture on advanced cryptographic algorithms, a niche interest from his undergraduate days. He downloaded an open-source decryption suite, feeding the scanned symbols into the program. The process felt impossibly tedious, a digital needle and an analog haystack. Then a cascade of alphanumeric characters began to unfurl across his screen, a coherent, albeit chilling, conversation. Dates, times, locations, and cryptic references to loose ends and agent payments. And then his blood ran cold. A specific entry, dated October 19, 1999, the exact day Sarah Jenkins vanished, loose end tied up by Agent X. Small payment recorded. The hair on his arms stood on end. Sarah's name was nowhere in this ledger, yet the echo of her disappearance reverberated through these stolen codes. Liam's initial visceral reaction was one of profound doubt, quickly followed by a surge of adrenaline. This couldn't be real. He spent the next hour meticulously re-verifying the decryption process, ensuring it wasn't a fluke or a corrupted file. He cross-referenced other entries in the ledger, confirming the validity of the financial transactions and the known activities of the bank manager, which were themselves a cover for something far larger than mere embezzlement. The coded entries described a network, a flow of illicit funds, and crucially, the removal of obstacles. The reference to Agent X was a key that unlocked a much larger, more sinister puzzle. He then pulled up Sarah Jenkins' cold case file, the digital ghost of a young woman lost for nearly a quarter century. The details of her meeting near the interchange, her known investigation into deep-rooted corruption, it all clicked with a horrifyingly precise finality. This wasn't just a bank manager's confession, it was a confession of something that directly implicated the silencing of Sarah Jenkins. By 6:00 p.m. that evening, Liam was on the phone with Detective Davies, the current head of the Akron Cold Case Unit. Davies, a no-nonsense officer who had inherited the Jenkins file, listened with growing disbelief and professional instinct. Within the hour, Liam was at the Akron Police Department, the precious ledger pages laid out under harsh fluorescent lights. A team of forensic cryptographers and digital analysts was immediately assembled. They confirmed the sophistication of the encryption and the authenticity of the ledger's contents, working through the night to deconstruct not just the entry related to Sarah, but the entire financial web it represented. By dawn, the picture was terrifyingly clear. Sarah Jenkins hadn't just disappeared. She had been deliberately silenced by a sophisticated, deeply entrenched criminal and political network. The ledger's encrypted communications provided not only a direct link to her abduction, but also a meticulously detailed map of the conspiracy that had orchestrated her demise. The news of the discovery, still partially shrouded in the fog of ongoing verification, began to filter out to Sarah's parents, Richard and Alina Jenkins. They received the call not with elation, but with a trembling, terrifying mixture of renewed hope and profound dread. The detective on the line spoke of new evidence of a breakthrough, but also hinted at the disturbing nature of the revelations. For 24 years, they had clung to the fragile hope of Sarah's return, or at least a satisfying explanation. Now, the possibility of a truth far more sinister than any they had dared to imagine settled upon them like a shroud. The community, which had never forgotten Sarah, began to whisper again, sensing that the long-dormant shadow over their city was about to be violently ripped away, promising a reckoning that would shake Ohio to its core. The discovery was not an ending, but a terrifying, unavoidable beginning. The chilly fluorescent hum of the Ohio Cold Case Unit archives seemed to amplify the gravity of the moment. Detective Davies, his perpetually tired eyes now sharp with a renewed, almost desperate focus, called an emergency meeting of his senior investigators and the forensic team. Liam O'Connell, the young genealogist whose discovery had ignited this firestorm, sat quietly, the decrypted ledger a stark digital ghost on his laptop. "This isn't just a cold case anymore," Davies stated, his voice raspy, gesturing toward the projection of the coded entry. "This is a confession. We're no longer looking for a missing person, we're looking for a murderer. Thorne," he stressed, the name hanging heady in the air, "is our primary suspect." A new task force was immediately formed, an amalgamation of experienced cold case detectives, skilled cryptographers, digital forensic analysts, and seasoned crime scene investigators, all working under the shadow of Sarah Jenkins' 24-year absence. Modern forensic technologies, unimaginable in 1999, were now being deployed to scour every piece of evidence. The air in the briefing room crackled with urgency, a collective understanding that this was the definitive opportunity, perhaps the last, to finally bring justice to Sarah and her shattered family, to unravel Thorne's meticulously woven deception. Liam's laptop screen displayed the scanned, brittle pages of the bank manager's ledger, now dissected frame by a team of forensic analysts. Dr. Lena Hansen, the unit's lead forensic scientist, meticulously examined the digital fingerprints left on the ledger's scanned copies, cross-referencing them against the known digital activity of the bank manager and the original archiving technician. Simultaneously, a separate team focused on the original physical ledger itself, conducting advanced DNA analysis on any latent biological traces. The Agent X payment, a digital transaction confirmed by correlating the ledger's timestamps with secured financial records from the era, was now being traced through every available digital pathway. Thorne's supposed alibi for October 19, 1999, a documented county council meeting in a different city, was being rigorously deconstructed. Cell tower data, even dated and less precise by today's standards, was being analyzed to determine if Thorne's phone could have been in Akron, near the Innerbelt interchange, during the critical hours Sarah disappeared. Early results indicated Thorne's phone pinged a tower closer to Akron than his claimed location, a discrepancy that sent a ripple of confirmation through the investigators. The decades-old testimonies of those interviewed in 1999 were now being revisited with a new lens. Detective Miller's initial reports, once dismissed as frustratingly sparse, were scrutinized for overlooked details. A seemingly insignificant mention by a witness about a dark sedan lurking near the interchange, previously disregarded as vague, was now reevaluated. Temporal analysis of Sarah's last known movements, cross-referenced with witness sightings and the bank's transaction logs around that period, painted a clearer picture. The torn green fabric found in Goodyear Heights Park, initially dismissed as irrelevant, was re-examined under advanced microscopy. It was definitively identified as a fragment of industrial insulation, identical to material known to be used in certain abandoned warehouses, including a property owned by a known associate of Thorne, a man who had previously been investigated for minor property offenses. The pieces, fragmented and scattered for 24 years, were finally beginning to form a cohesive, terrifying mosaic. Thorne's meetings with the bank manager, once viewed as routine business, were now understood as direct exchanges within the criminal enterprise detailed in the ledger. The breakthrough arrived with a meticulous forensic audit of Thorne's financial records and communications from the period leading up to and following Sarah's disappearance. Advanced data recovery techniques unearthed deleted email fragments and call logs from Thorne's personal computer and his office. These revealed encrypted communications with the bank manager, using the same cipher found in the ledger, discussing asset containment and unforeseen variables, terms now understood as references to the money laundering operation and Sarah's investigation. Furthermore, metadata analysis of newly discovered digital imagery from Thorne's archived work files from late 1999 revealed blurred background images consistent with the distinct graffiti art adorning the abandoned structures near the Akron Innerbell Highway interchange, a detail Thorne had carefully erased but never documented in his official reports. The final piece fell into place when a digital forensic expert pieced together Thorne's supposed alibi, demonstrating how he had manipulated travel logs and bribed a low-level administrator to falsify meeting minutes. The truth was undeniable. Marcus Thorne, the respected town councilman, was not only the mastermind of the money laundering scheme but also the orchestrator of Sarah Jenkins' abduction and murder, her silence taught his own hand to protect his criminal empire. With the complete truth laid bare, the task force meticulously prepared for Thorne's apprehension. Detective Davies, briefing his team, emphasized the need for absolute precision, citing Thorne's known ruthlessness and preparedness. A warrant for Thorne's arrest, detailing charges of kidnapping and murder, was issued. The plan involved covert surveillance of Thorne's residence and office, followed by a coordinated apprehension to minimize risk. Simultaneously, a search warrant was executed for Thorne's properties, specifically targeting the abandoned warehouse identified through the forensic analysis. Liam O'Connell, his initial discovery vindication coupled with overwhelming dread, was tasked with preparing a detailed, evidence-based report for Sarah's parents, Richard and Eleanor Jenkins, to explain the horrifying reality of their daughter's final moments, preparing them for a confrontation with a truth far more devastating than they could have ever imagined. The air was thick with the weight of impending revelation, the culmination of a 24-year nightmare poised to break. The dawn of November 15, 2023, brought a quiet, tense efficiency to the operation targeting Marcus Thorne. As Thorne, impeccably dressed as always, exited his stately brick home, a coordinated tactical team moved in. Thorne's initial reaction to the uniformed officers was one of regal indignation, quickly replaced by a chillingly blank stare as Detective Davies approached him, warrant in hand. Marcus Thorne, Davies stated, his voice steady, "You are under arrest for the kidnapping and murder of Sarah Jenkins, and numerous other charges related to organized crime and financial fraud." Thorne didn't resist, his composure an unnerving testament to years of practiced deception, but a flicker of something recognition, perhaps, or the dawning comprehension of his meticulously constructed world crumbling crossed his face as Davies uttered Sarah's name. Simultaneously, at the pre-identified abandoned warehouse, a secondary team executed the search warrant. It was there, within a specially constructed, reinforced concrete chamber concealed beneath the facility's forgotten loading dock, that they uncovered the final, devastating truth. The forensic unit's meticulous work confirmed the remains belonged to Sarah Jenkins, systematically catalogued and preserved by Thorne with a chilling detachment that spoke volumes of his utter disregard for human life. The ledger's cryptic entries, once mere symbols, had culminated in this grim, irrefutable discovery, proving that Sarah's pursuit of truth had led her directly to its most brutal architect. Detective Davies met Richard and Eleanor Jenkins at their home later that afternoon, the weight of 2.5 decades of unanswered questions in his every word. He presented them not just with the arrest of Marcus Thorne, but with the irrefutable evidence of Sarah's final moments, the forensic confirmation of her remains, the chilling details from Thorne's recovered digital communications, and the ledger's damning testimony that detailed Thorne's direct involvement. Eleanor listened with a quiet, stoic devastation, tears streaming down her face, while Richard sat rigidly, clutching a framed photograph of Sarah, his knuckles white. There was no joyous relief, only the profound, agonizing sorrow of confirmation. The fear of the unknown had been replaced by the horror of known reality. Their daughter had been murdered by a man they and the entire community had trusted implicitly. The understanding that Thorne's betrayal extended to manipulating every official procedure, every heartfelt plea for answers, added a layer of bitter injustice to their grief that was almost unbearable. Yet, amidst the darkness, there was a flicker of peace, the agonizing certainty that Sarah was found, her story finally told in its entirety. The arrest and subsequent trial of Marcus Thorne became a watershed moment for Ohio. Thorne, revealed as the puppeteer of a vast money laundering operation and the orchestrator of Sarah Jenkins' murder, was convicted on all counts, receiving a life sentence without parole. The court proceedings laid bare the sheer scale of his corruption, implicating several other figures within state and local government, leading to a cascade of resignations, further arrests, and a sweeping statewide audit of the financial and political systems Thorne had exploited for years. The discovery of the coded ledger and the subsequent reinvestigation spurred a significant overhaul of Ohio's cold case unit, with increased funding for advanced digital forensics, data analysis, and interagency cooperation. New legislation was passed, establishing stricter transparency laws for campaign finance and closer oversight of public officials, a direct response to Thorne's sophisticated abuse of power, ensuring that such a devastating betrayal of public trust would be harder to conceal in the future. The legacy of Sarah Jenkins, once a whispered remembrance of a promising young life tragically cut short, transformed into a powerful symbol of journalistic integrity and unwavering perseverance. The Jenkins family, channeling their profound grief and the hard-won solace of their daughter's story being fully revealed, established the Sarah Jenkins Foundation. This foundation provides grants and mentorship to aspiring investigative journalists, particularly those focusing on corruption and social injustice, ensuring Sarah's passion for truth continues to ignite change. The community, forever marked by Thorne's treachery and Sarah's enduring spirit, found a collective sense of healing, not by forgetting, but by honoring her memory through renewed vigilance and active engagement in civic life. The case served as a stark and ultimately inspiring reminder that even in the face of overwhelming darkness and deeply ingrained corruption, the pursuit of truth, however dangerous, can ultimately illuminate the path to justice and lasting change. Sarah's story became a testament to the enduring power of truth, a beacon in the often murky waters of systemic corruption and human deception. It underscored the vital importance of never relinquishing the search for answers, no matter how cold the trail or how deeply buried the secrets. Her unwavering dedication, reaching across 2.5 decades to finally bring reckoning, highlighted the profound impact one individual's commitment can have, not just on her own life, but on the fabric of society itself. Sarah Jenkins' disappearance and the subsequent revelation of its truth serve as a timeless reminder that vigilance, empathy, and an unyielding pursuit of justice are not abstract ideals, but essential components of a healthy democracy, ensuring that the voices of the silenced are finally heard. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more compelling true crime stories.